So you're probably wondering how I got here. This place feels huge.
Have you ever felt like the universe has been pushing you toward change, and no matter what you do, it feels like there's no way to stop it? And the thing is, you know deep down this change is necessary, but it's scary. 2023 has been the most transitional year of my life, and even more is about to change. Almost 2 years ago, I signed a lease by myself on a studio apartment in New York City. Living alone was never something I had in the cards, and in fact, as a kid, I was absolutely terrified at the thought of living by myself. I couldn't imagine being on my own or alone in the world, and I always told myself that I would never be in a situation where I would have to be alone. I moved to New York when I was 18 for college. I lived on Staten Island for 4 years, and immediately after graduation, I moved into Manhattan. I started by subletting a room in Washington Heights with 2 friends who had graduated a few years before me, and it was some of the best months of my life. I was living in Manhattan for the first time, being with friends, and I felt the freedom to do whatever I wanted to do. Shortly after, I signed a lease with 3 of my friends on a 4-bedroom apartment, also in Washington Heights. But after 3 short weeks of bliss, the pandemic hit. All of my roommates left New York City to go stay with their parents, but I didn't want to leave. When I signed that lease, I decided New York City was my home, and I wanted to stay. For the next 4 months, I stayed in my 4-bedroom apartment with my now ex-boyfriend, and slowly my roommates started to come back. Things in my life post-pandemic felt different, though. I had become very dependent on others. I was scared to do things alone. I was scared to leave my apartment. And eventually, after 2 years in our shared apartment, we all decided it was time to move. Initially, I had intended to move in with my boyfriend at the time, but ultimately he had decided he wanted to move into his own apartment with his own roommates. And meanwhile, my current roommates were going their separate ways. One was moving to a different borough, and the other 2 moving in together. I had counted myself out of moving in with any of them, thinking I already had a plan in place with my current partner, and so I was left to figure out for myself where to go. It's funny how everything always works out, but nothing usually works out the way you planned. I was 24 at the time and saw my entire life laid out in front of me. I had been in a relationship for 6 years and thought the next time I moved, I would be married, or pretty close to it. So I decided to live alone. My reasoning was that this would be the last chance in my life to be independent and live on my own. I was sure that the next move would be with the guy I was dating and the rest would be history. So, after looking at 13 apartments, I signed the lease on my very own studio apartment. I told myself I would never actually be alone. I had a boyfriend who could come help me if I needed to. I was still extremely dependent, and even though I was alone in this apartment on paper, I constantly had him around. I also just want to clarify, this story isn't to drag my ex or anything. His involvement is just a big part of my personal character arc, so it's important information. Over that year, though, there were several-month periods where he would go away for work, so I did end up having to be a little bit alone, but I still was able to use him as a crutch. And living alone is kind of exactly what you think it'll be. Waking up and going to bed alone, getting very comfortable just being by yourself, feeling lonely, but also remembering the things your roommates did to piss you off and wondering which you would rather take. But remember how I said, nothing usually works out the way you planned. I thought I was moving into this apartment for one last chance of independence, but the universe had other plans. It was actually the beginning of my new life, alone. As we were nearing 2023, my life started to change drastically. Within the first 3 months of the year, I had gotten laid off from my job, broken up with, and had gotten bedbugs. In the blink of an eye, my life was completely different, and I was not expecting any of it. It felt like every single thing in my life was changing, and there was absolutely nothing I could do to stop it. The only constant I had was my tiny little studio apartment. The tiny little studio apartment that I didn't even want. In December of 2022, I had been living here for a year and it was time to renew my lease. My boyfriend at the time was away for work for 4 months and we wanted to move in together. I wanted to end my lease and find a new apartment with him, but the timing wasn't quite right. His lease wasn't up yet and he wouldn't be back till February. We were currently in December. So we decided I would re-sign, and when his lease was up, we would look for an apartment together and I would break this lease. So I stayed. Even though we agreed on this decision, I wasn't super happy with it. I still really wanted to leave and be with other people. I was sick of being alone, and I had several friends moving at the same time my lease was up who needed roommates, so I could have had options had I decided to leave and move in with someone else. I was lonely, but I stayed waiting on the promise I would move back in with my partner when he came back. So, flash forward to March, I'm in my apartment that's currently being fumigated. I was unexpectedly broken up with, and I was miserable. For the first year I lived in my apartment, I thought I understood what it meant to be independent and to be on my own, but I didn't. I used my partner as a crutch. I didn't push myself out of my comfort zone. I was timid and scared, and I was reliant for that first year. And now, for the first time in my life, I was actually alone. My worst nightmare felt like it came true. Now, this isn't to negate my amazing support system of friends and family. They were there for me this entire year, but all of a sudden, I didn't have a person I could rely on 24/7. I didn't have a person I lived with and I could sympathize with, and I felt like my entire future had been pulled out from under me. I felt lost, I felt alone, I felt confused. And it's funny because I thought I signed a lease to live alone as a stepping stone in my relationship, but in reality, I signed a lease to live alone to teach me what it means to be independent and to teach me how to be without my relationship. This year has been the weirdest year of my life, but I am so much stronger because of it. I've spent all of 2023 figuring out myself. I've learned so much, and I've become a much more well-rounded version of myself, one that I never would have met if I was never forced to be alone. I thought 2023 was going to be the beginning of a new chapter in my life, but it turns out it was the end of one. Everything I thought my life was going to be a year ago isn't even in my view anymore, but the thing is, I'm happy about it. There was a time I couldn't even walk 5 blocks outside after dark by myself, or go across town to an appointment without panicking, or even fathom doing anything completely alone. Now, I feel happy to do those things. I had so many things in my life this year that weren't serving me anymore, and the universe physically pushed them out of my life to make room for change. A job that wasn't serving me, a relationship that wasn't serving me, a life that wasn't serving me. This year, I had the opportunity to start from scratch and reinvent what I want my life to look like. And I was able to do that in my apartment, an apartment that taught me everything. I was in love in this apartment. I was heartbroken in this apartment. I learned I am allergic to bedbug bites in this apartment. I was shown unconditional love by my friends in this apartment. I went through a series of very scary health scares in this apartment. I adopted my cat Bennett in this apartment. I learned how to be alone in this apartment. I successfully took apart and built a bed and many other pieces of furniture myself in this apartment. I found my love for singing again in this apartment. I became a better version of myself in this apartment. I was able to make YouTube my full-time job in this apartment. And because of that, I got to share this apartment with all of you. And now that it's time to let go, I finally understand the purpose of this place. It saved me from being scared. It saved me from committing to a relationship that I'm much better off without. It saved me from giving up on my dreams. I have taken every life lesson this 250 square foot space has given me, and now I'm ready for a new chapter. The place that I'm in, moving out of this apartment, is a completely different place that I was at moving in. And so I can say this apartment has given me everything, but it no longer serves me, and it's time to move on. Change is scary, but we have to adapt and adjust for our own good. Nothing can last forever, and it's such a melancholy feeling. I'm trying to live in the moment so I can remember what everything feels like forever, but one day things will be different. Moving is always something that's tough. Letting go of a place you called home for years is one of the most difficult things a person can do. I'll hold this apartment in my heart forever and remember it as the first place that I called completely my own, and the place that my world fell apart so I could make space for a better one. So many changes happened to me this year and I didn't have a say, so I'm finally choosing the change for myself. I lived 2 different versions of my life in this apartment, and one day they'll just be memories of the hundreds of versions of my life I've lived. But these 2 versions have changed me forever, and I'm very grateful. Now, it's time for a change. Time for my next chapter, and I feel ready. So what exactly is next? Well, it's a lot of change, but it's the good kind, and I can't wait to share it with you.